Those things are probably absorptive.
So
the
example,
extra redshift may be a totally different.
So that's why you're saying the whole thing has to be rethought.
Has to be rethought because it's entirely possible that just now knowing what the dark matter, the baryonic matter is doing, solves all of the mysteries of WIMP dark matter and dark energy. So for example, if the universe made primordially this population of planets, which I saw observationally in 1995 with quasar microlensing, and now is being confirmed by the Japanese doing what should have been done 10 years ago. But anyway, now showing, yes, free roaming planets not associated with stars do exist and can and probably do contain all of the matter necessary to balance rotation curves of galaxies. Right. So we're done with that. Okay. But if these were made primordially, as we now can understand and now believe, then you have what would be a population of objects which is cooling as the universe cools, and so the atmospheres are contracting, and so their optical properties are changing. Can you see that this could give the appearance of dark energy?
Sure, by changing the apparent expansion rate, but it doesn't have anything to do with the expansion.
No, not so much the expansion rate as the opacity of the universe.
Well, not just opacity, but refractive index.
Okay, the refractive index then of the little particles and bigger particles, all of it.
Right.
And so now you have to rethink everything.
Yeah.
So you have to consider that the evidence for dark energy and WIMP matter no longer exists.
Okay. Dark energy never sat well.
It really does change everything.
Here's my own feeling about dark energy doesn't sit well with me. I consider that the evidence for dark energy no longer exists. It was in supernovas where we noticed that the distant ones are fainter than we think they ought to be given their redshift. So that might have to do with changing properties of the baryons, of the baryonic planets. But the dark energy I kind of like to exist as an explanation for what is this complex material in the universe. When I say that the universe behaves like the dimensions x, y, z, and t are all complex variables, well, is then that complex variable part the thing that quantum mechanics has always known has to be there to describe a particle, what we call the Schrödinger function and the Schrödinger wave, psi, and governed by the Schrödinger equation? And is that what dark energy is in the universe? So maybe the universe does have some dark energy. It's an ether-like field, and that it is what quantum waves are, and maybe the universe is filling with dark energy because it's consciousness only, and the universe is filling with consciousness.
Well, you know, that brings me back to the Michelson-Morley experiment. And I went to some conferences where they had some DoD physicists that were familiar but had not worked directly on some of the ET technologies. And they were saying that DoD physics is at least 50 years ahead of academic physics. And where academic physics went wrong was the misinterpretation of the Michelson-Morley experiment, and that there is ether.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that, in fact, Michelson or Morley, I forget which one, redid the experiment using 3 dimensions, not just one, and actually found evidence for ether, but that never got to the popular physics canon after the original experiment concluded that there was none. So that's an interesting little attribute to think about as well.
All right. That is good. That does put a different spin on it, and it makes it sound more like maybe there is dark energy, and maybe dark energy does exist, and it is this thing that quantum waves that describe particles existed.
Right. They went further to say that the original Maxwell's equations, before Heaviside got a hold of them and simplified them, has all of the stuff that's predictive of the electrogravitic effects with gravity and the terms that Heaviside thought were just minor, just sort of simplified them.
Agreed. To remind all of us, the original Maxwell's equations are much more important because they admit solutions that look like magnetic monopoles, for example.
Yeah, right.
But because we've never observed monopoles to exist, we said, okay, well, so there are no terms that are expressed by the gradient of the magnetic potential or the magnetic field. So those terms were eliminated
Right.
because those would only be present if there were a source of magnetic field, unipolar magnetic field, which would be then a magnetic monopole.
Right.
Now, it might turn out that the magnetic monopole is a virtual particle. In other words, doesn't really exist as having mass, but has a virtual presence in the universe,
Right.
and that in understanding the dark energy attribute, you have to include it to understand all the possible states of the universe. So I can imagine that this is true, and I have long thought that I myself have to re-examine the way Maxwell's equations are understood by us and what terms were eliminated, because I think I agree with you. There is room for there to be a gravito-magnetic interaction through Maxwell's equations if the terms are all included. And I suspect it's also true that, remember, we're saying that the consciousness part is the rotational property of the wave, and that's also what magnetics deals with. It deals with the rotational aspects that are a result of of charges moving and charges being separated. So any changes in that create this magnetic vorticity, and that's very close to gravity then. So in a sense, there should be some coupling, and I've long felt that intuitively.
I'm going to throw out something it could be completely off base here, but it just popped in, so I'm just going to throw it out. One of the things that I keep thinking about over and over and over is about this, the Earth's rotation. It just stops. It stops spinning and then it reverses. Okay, now I don't know how that's possible, but just hearing you talk, because this is what Chris and I talked about in the kitchen, and it's something, you keep thinking about. So is it possible that, what we're just talking about based on consciousness and energy and about, the way that everything is moving and everything is working, that literally because the consciousness is rising and shifting on the planet with some people, and then we've got others that are not, that literally it creates this stoppage of the Earth's spin?
I think it's all related, yeah.
And that's what, and then, with it reversing, that maybe it is
Well, what I had is some
the
weird
higher
thought.
consciousness that takes, is it possible?
Well,
Yeah,
it's
I'd
a
like to
weird
answer that,
thought.
but go ahead.
I just came in. So
I was just thinking about the magneto engine of the Earth's core actually flipping with a magnetic reversal, and as it flips, it starts spinning in the opposite direction, which I was wondering if that could actually cause the Earth to begin with turning in the opposite direction. I don't know. It's just a weird thought that came in visually as you asked that.
Yeah.
So.
I don't know.
To get back to your question exactly,
I don't know.
remember that the Earth as a spinning object in the universe is in some ways a product of the sum of our human consciousnesses that are here observing it. And this does beg the question, if a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody here to witness it, did it fall? In the same sense, that is a real question here. If there's nobody to observe the existence of the Earth, does the Earth exist? Or to what extent does it exist? And because the human consciousness does involve itself with this vorticity of the quantum wave function, I could imagine that if the universe could summon up enough conscious activity to cancel the entire quantum wave pattern describing the rotating Earth and reverse the rotation of that quantum pattern, that the Earth would be rotating in a different direction. It would then have to be done by the universe to such a powerful extent that it cancels and neutralizes our human experience of the rotation of the Earth. Can you see that if some other cosmic intelligence could exceed the sum of all human intelligence, in principle, it could change that quantum hologram describing a rotating Earth.
So tomorrow, someone would ask, well, where does the sun rise? You'd say, well, it rises in the west, just like it always has.
Yeah, but that could automatically change.
I guess so.
Or if
Such
it
a
could change
conscious
human consciousness.
Yeah.
instantaneously.
Well, I mean, we know that the ETs do change human